Ronald, for being here and speaking with me today, and I'm excited to hear a little bit about your many years of sounding the shofar. So tell me how you first picked up the shofar and what inspired you.
But I always thought the shofar should be a really inspiring thing at the High Holy Days. And growing up at Emmanuel, the gentleman who sounded the shofar for a bunch of years used a ram's horn and not an antelope horn like I use. And it was fine, but it was not booming. And I always thought that it should be. And so I had the opportunity when I was a teenager. I'd always grown up with music in my life. I played piano and sang. And then I started playing French horn in 7th grade. And I must have been after bar mitzvah around 14, you'd have youth services during the High Holy Days, and they needed someone to sound the shofar, and I volunteered. And fortunately, I could pick up the shofar and make a sound. And it was fun, and everybody was a little surprised, but I was a kid, and nobody thought much of it. And but that's how I got started. And then when I grew up and I went to college and law school and came back to Birmingham, the gentleman finally got to a point where he was moving to Florida. So there was an opening in the shofar department. And I went to the Rabbi Jacobs, who was then the rabbi at the time, and asked him, could I sound the shofar? And he said, fine. And that's how I got to start doing the shofar at Temple Emmanuel when I had just come back from being in law school.
So tell me about some of the variety of places that you have sounded the shofar. So not only in Temple Emmanuel services, but also here at Temple Bethel and in some other settings outside of regular synagogue services.
Well, probably the smaller settings were fun. I sound the shofar regularly at the N.E. Miles Jewish Day School, where I've had children and grandchildren, and I just love the institution, and going to that place to sound the shofar the month before the High Holy Days has always been something meaningful. There's several other people that do that. Lots of people get to do that, and that's always been fun. I'm going to do that again this next week, and my granddaughter Iris is going to stand next to me as I sound the shofar. I sounded it once in Israel when I was on my first mission trip, and as we were entering Jerusalem, the bus pulled over, and we overlooked the old city. And David Kimmerling had a shofar and asked if I would sound it, and I did. It didn't sound as good as what I sound in the sanctuary, and that was upsetting. And but still, that was kind of a neat place to do it. I've scared cats and stuff like that in the house. But the most unusual is the fact that after sounding the shofar at Temple Emmanuel for several years, Temple Bethel had an opportunity to find somebody new. J.B. Mazer had been sounding the shofar I don't know how long, and I heard he did just a lovely job. But as was explained to me, J.B. decided he wanted to have the flexibility to visit children who lived outside of Birmingham, and so was going to give up the duty of sounding the shofar. And so I got a call from Jimmy Krell, actually, and asked if I would be interested in doing that, and he knew I'd sounded the shofar at Emmanuel, and can I work it out? And I wanted to do that, and I talked to Rabbi Miller at Emmanuel, and we said we can make it work. At Emmanuel at the time, they had 2 morning services because they had so many people. And so I gave up the sounding at both of those services, and I traded. So I would do the early services at Emmanuel that would get over around 11-ish, and depending on how long the rabbi spoke. And then I'd walk up here and be right about the time we were finished with the Torah, and it'd be the time for the shofar service here. So that led to one really funny event. It was funny and beautiful at the same time, is that Rabbi Miller one year went way long and in his sermon. And so by the time I got finished sounding the shofar and running up here, I came in, and Rabbi Glussman was the rabbi at the time, and he had just finished sounding the shofar. And what I found out was when he got to the shofar service, he says, "Where's Ronald?" And I wasn't here. And what he did is he sent somebody back to get Rabbi Culpepper's shofar, and he sounded Rabbi Culpepper, who had just recently passed at that time. And so I stayed on. Glussman caught my eye when I came in, and he said, "Well, you missed the first part. We still have Musaf." So I did get to sound the shofar at both times. And so that became an issue. And so I negotiated with Rabbi Miller, and we changed the order of their service at Emmanuel so that the shofar service would become before the Torah service, so that if I needed to leave and the rabbi wanted to speak long, that wasn't to be a problem. So ever since then, as long as I was doing both, that's the way it worked. And then at some point, not too many years ago, it was too much, and I just was up here much more involved, and so just became one synagogue shofar sounder.
That actually seems reasonable. So I love that sense of community between the two. So tell me just in a few sentences, what has sounding the shofar all these years meant to you personally? And maybe within that, why are you putting it down?
It's a good question. It's going to be hard to put it down. But it has been, for me, one of the most meaningful, non-verbal expressions of spirituality that I can experience. It's meant a lot to my family. My kids have all seen me do it all the years. My grandchildren have seen me do it all these years. It has connected me with people in our community locally, people who come to visit the community. I get notes every once in a while from people, or Facebook posts or things like that, where people appreciate what it has meant to them. And it's really it's a way to experience spirituality, and it means different things to different people. And so the lovely notes that I've gotten from people that said, this made me think of my grandfather, or this made me think of my grandmother, or made me think of growing up in the synagogue where I grew up. All those kind of things were great for me. And plus, just the physical act of doing it is something that I just love doing it. And I'd love to see the reaction of the congregation. I love the murmurs that go, that start as soon as it's all over. And I love the bad jokes that people would tell me about sounding the shofar. And so it was just a great way that uniquely allowed me to interact with the community in a way that not many people have been able to experience. I got to the point where there's so many people that can sound the shofar, and now that I'm getting closer to 70, it's harder to make the sound last as long as I used to. I used to hold those notes a lot longer. And there's so many really talented people in this congregation and at Emmanuel. And so it's time. I've always had a thing in our family is quit doing something while it's still fun. Because then people will remember it. They won't remember the bad part. And not that there is a bad part, but this has been a great run. 40 years is kind of a magic number in Judaism in a lot of ways. And it's time, and I'm looking forward to the time when I can sit with Glennis and my kids and my grandchildren on the High Holy Days, enjoy hearing the shofar sounded by someone else, which is something that's impossible to do when you're doing it yourself. And so I will miss it dearly. I know when I get to the last sound of Tekiah Gadolah at the end of Musaf and at the end of the service on day one, knowing that this will be the last time I really do it like this, I'll be very sad, I'll be satisfied, and I'll be proud of what I've done over the years. But it's just be a mixture of emotion, and I'll just try not to cry.
So last question, what advice do you have for those wanting to learn?
Just learn, practice. Not everybody can do it, it's not easy, but it's not hard either. I've had shofar teaching classes, and I'm happy to do that as well. But there's been a lot of people that I've taught to sound the shofar and have gone on to become world famous shofar sounders. Now seriously, it's just, if you want to do it, let the rabbi or let people at the synagogue know, because there's really a lot of opportunities for that to be meaningful to a lot of people. And I've been overly lucky to be able to do something like this for 40 years, and that's probably not going to be something that happens a lot.
Well, thank you for chatting with me today and for all your years of sounding the shofar, and we'll all look forward to hearing you up on the bima soon.
Thanks, Margaret. I look forward to hearing it too.